All right.
Looks like we're live. I want to thank everybody for being here. Once again, our second Church Tech Hangout. My name's Tim Adams. We have Jeremy Smith and T.C. Johnson. Paul Allen Clifford, I think, is correct there. And is it Dennis Warner? Is that correct? Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, welcome. And once again, I'm Tim Adams, and we're just going to dive right in. Our agenda today is going to cover three basic areas. We have whole house broadcast, or basically how you get a signal from one location to many locations throughout your facility, digital signage, and security. And we're going to tackle the idea of network security, as many of our systems are going to be using, the trend is going to use Ethernet protocols and networks, and it's not unheard of to have several individual networks within one facility for different uses. So, without any ado, let's dive right into whole house broadcast. And the basic question that's before us is, how do we get one signal generally being captured in the sanctuary during the service, and how do we get that to overflow rooms, to a mother's room, and then any other rooms or facilities or uses that need to be maybe projected on a wall. Maybe the choir is backstage, they would like a feed. So Paul, I'm going to ask you to kind of maybe tackle that one and give us an idea of what you think is the best way to do that. Did we lose Paul?
There we go.
Oh, there we go.
No,
okay.
no. My mute button was hidden. So anyway, so what I would do is I would start with, well, first off, you need to know where the signal is going, so you know what kind of signal you need to get there. But generally speaking, it's just a matter of having cabling and distribution amplifiers to make to split it, because you don't want to split a signal more than once, and that's really not as good as it could be. So what do you think, Tim? Am I missing something? I mean, the way I normally do it is Balins on each end, and then DAs and distribution amplifiers.
Yeah, definitely. That has been the modality of choice, I guess would be the phrase I would use, for many years. And Ethernet is an amazing protocol. It's an amazing just technology to have available. I mean, you can use it to send audio, you can use it to send video, you can use it to send VGA, DVI, HDMI, and pretty much whatever you want. We're seeing a lot of, I guess, market share coming from the fiber world. Once again, telecom has invaded our space. How dare they? But fiber is just amazing, because you can carry so much data. But yeah, distribution amplifiers, for those that don't know what that is just a device that takes a signal in, and the ones that you want to focus on are not the cheap ones that are going to split the signal without re-amplifying it, hence the term amplifier in distribution amplifier. So they're really nice, and quality DAs, is what we call them for short, will actually take a separate signal for each output, and they'll reclock it, they'll re-amplify it, and you get a really clean signal that way. The Radio Shack and maybe Walmart versions that you may run across out there are not really designed for facility level signal distribution. Would you guys agree with that? I'm going to open it up.
I personally don't know much about the cable running. I have an alternate idea, though, if you're open to hearing it.
Yeah, please.
So my church is right in the middle of planning this out, and we are going to go with the HDMI cabling everything you just mentioned. We've already hung some nice LCD TVs in various places around the church. And then, of course, the next step is going to be adding cameras and things like that. We still don't have the entire infrastructure set up. But early on, we weren't sure we would be able to run the cables through the walls. We didn't know if that'd be cost prohibitive. No one in the church really knew how to do that. We had a couple of different issues that we were looking at. Another project we're working on is getting our church Wi-Fi up to snuff. Right now, it's just a simple little old Linksys router that barely covers a quarter of the church, and is, even in those parts it does cover, is a little iffy. So, just as an alternate idea, we thought maybe use a Chromecast. So each TV obviously has HDMI ports on it, right? If we were to get our network up to a nicely distributed N-level network with multiple transmitters throughout the building, then we could use a Chromecast on each TV, each pointing back to the URL of the live stream, and have it just stream via the net into each of those areas. One of the drawbacks there is you're going to have a bit of a latency, and then another drawback is obviously is dependent on your network. And that's just something we're going to tackle a little later on, talking about the multiple network issue, right? Just a little teaser on that. One of the solutions would have been to set up a separate side wireless network dedicated just for that video stream, so that the only packets traveling on it would have been video to avoid collision and things like that. So yeah, Chromecast, alternate idea for the budget intensive.
And I think that
could I say a little something about that?
Yeah.
No, Paul.
Haven't tested it out, so it could be that I'm just crying wolf here, but I'd be a little concerned about that, because isn't each Chromecast going to need to go to the net? And in effect, if you've got 20 TVs, you've got 20 video connections on the internet, and you're going to need pretty beefy download speeds for that, aren't you?
I would be concerned with it. So on my residential home network, where I'm running, I think it's 15 megs. I run up to, we'll say, I do the max 2 Netflix sometimes at a time, with video gaming, with my wife streaming British F1 racing because we can't get it very good here in America. We do some pretty intensive stuff just here in my house. Also, this is something I haven't tested personally yet, but I have an understanding that the Chromecast can stream directly from the host computer, not from over the net. So you'd be using your upwards of 450 megabit connection on your Wi-Fi, not your ISP speed.
And I think that as far as implementing this in your church, that the long-term factor of all this is that you can have great opportunities with, especially with fiber that's coming out and the gigabit upload, download, and have that separation. So long-term approach, that's probably going to be one of the best options to at least implement. And so if you're a church right now that is on that, should we do this, should we not do this, as far as installing hardware, installing the cabling, that you probably want to look at all your options, especially if you're in a bigger city that's going to get those high fiber, high optical options that might be a great solution for you. So eventually that will probably be the norm, because our video footage won't get beyond maybe 4K and to be worth it. And so I think that we will eventually get to that point that it'll be a great opportunity.
Right, and if you can keep the streaming local in your intranet, in your building network, these tremendous speeds we're getting out of N and AC right now are plenty to facilitate video traffic across that network.
Well, that sounds like actually a pretty ingenious solution. You know, obviously this is based on some research, TC, that you guys have done, and this is the solution that you guys have chosen to at least pursue initially, to see if it indeed, the theory will match up with reality. Would that be?
Well, yeah, and on the side, we ended up not going with that option because we also installed an elevator at the same time. and we learned there was pre-laid conduit going through all of our walls that made running the HDMI stuff feasible. So we are going with the HDMI, the cabled solution, but the Chromecasting was just an interesting way to jump in and get our feet wet if we wanted to do that.
Okay, fair enough. One thing I did want to clarify for those that may be watching either now or in the future, given that your initial description, TC, indicated that the Chromecast was to be pointed to a live stream URL, I want to make sure that we clarify that if that indeed is the only way to get it to work, you obviously would need to have a live stream to point the Chromecast to.
Yes,
So,
I should point that out as well. Yeah, you're right. Thank you for pointing that out. So another part of my thing, I brought this up in our last video chat when we're looking at our possibility of live streaming on the web, is me being a penny pincher. I wanted to use Google Plus, Hangout on Air like we're doing right now, which would simul stream over to YouTube, and then if the Chromecast needs an internet feed, you would point it to your YouTube feed.
okay.
If it does. Again, there's a few blanks I still need to fill in, but
Sure.
Hey, it's something to think about, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And as Jeremy mentioned, the internet speed here, at least in the U.S., is probably only going to get faster. With Google getting in, I mean, years ago, I heard my brother works in telecom. He was telling me that Google was buying up dark fiber, like it was going out of style. Now we know why. They're interested in becoming an ISP, and Google, like Walmart, if they put their mind to something, they're probably going to do it, and they're going to do it fairly well. That doesn't mean there's not going to be bumps along the road, but hey, if you're an early adopter, that comes with the territory. So I am a little curious if Jeremy or Paul or even Dennis have anything else to add to this particular discussion.
I will say I think the one thing that we need to talk about, especially with establishing this entire process, is to know what your budget is, because I will say, as great as a wireless option is, especially Chromecast, that's a short-term solution that will have monthly costs over time, especially if you're wanting to have the high-speed internet, because you're going to have multiple networks. If you're streaming Chromecast to all your church TVs, you're probably also having people in your congregation that are running it, so you're going to need 2 different networks there, and then how are you going to split that up? You're probably going to have someone that's dedicating their time to being able to use all that, so there's a budget there for either a staff person or at the very least to hire someone to come in and to install all of that. So if that's the case and you're okay with a monthly cost that goes a long time, go with it. But in the short term or in the long term situation, it might be just best to install that hardware and to know that you only have one network that's the church network that's used on Sunday mornings, and everything else is hardwired, that you're not relying on your internet service provider to make sure that your TV is working in your cry room. So I think that that's another thing to keep into consideration.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing that I wanted to point out, and Dennis, I'm going to get to you in just a second. I'm not sure if you have anything to add to this discussion or not, but I want to give you the opportunity. I did want to point out that if you're going to do anything over your wireless network, be it audio, video, lighting control, whatever, that network has to be dedicated to that purpose. Don't even try to share public Wi-Fi with a network that handles mission-critical signals like audio, video, lighting, or projection. Because if the Wi-Fi, for whatever reason, gets clogged up, you're going to lose it. You're going to lose public Wi-Fi access to the internet, and you're going to lose that mission-critical signal, whatever that signal is. One of the other things, well, let me do this. Why don't I give Dennis a chance to talk, and we'll see if he has anything to add to this.
You didn't have to do that, but anyway. I was just here to listen, but we're a small church, and what we use is just VGA out of our Mac. We run a Mac Mini, and we have 2 screens up front, 2 LCDs up front, and then we run like an announcement foyer area. We don't do any live streaming or anything like that yet. I think our church is like 70 people, so it's pretty small. But I kind of kicked around the idea of buying an Apple TV for each of our monitors and doing kind of like the Chromecast, like TC said. But our internet connection is like less than 3G. 3G smartphone is faster than our internet right now, so we got to upgrade that. But that's kind of because we run the VGA and it's only like 800 by 600 DPI, so it's not the full thing that like the greatest quality. So.
Hey Dennis, how are you getting your announcements to your foyer area right now?
A Windows computer, and we run out of our computer into like a splitter, a video splitter, and we just play them while the pre-service is going on.
Okay.
And then we have another computer. We run 2 computers. We run a Windows computer for the announcements, and then we run a Mac Mini for the service, and we use Proclaim right now.
Okay.
And so that's how we do it. Is I just make the announcements and then go from there.
Right. I mentioned before that we have like our TVs already hung, but no cabling going to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so for the time being, we're running a rotating slideshow off of a USB thumb drive plugged into our TVs just happen to have USB ports on them.
Mm-hmm.
And, so that's our midterm solution. So
yeah,
very similar.
That'll work. Well, that's awesome, Dennis. Actually, I'm actually very impressed for a 70-member congregation. That's pretty high tech. So congratulations on that, and well done.
I like it to be a lot more high tech, but I'm trying to, make my ideas go over well, but
well,
someday.
I mean, I don't know about the rest of these guys, but I hear you there, man. Just keep plugging away, and if I were to give you any ideas, paint a vision for the leadership. If you get the leadership on board, and then they can paint the vision for the rest of the church, it's going to make it a lot easier on you.
Mm-hmm.
Because that really should not be your burden to bear. It's your job to tell them what the options are and what that's going to look like and what benefits that's going to give everybody. And if you can do that, then the sky's the limit.
That's the issue that I'm having with the small church.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to get off subject, but just half the leadership is on, half the leadership is off, and but we're working on that. We're trying to get it done.
Well, bravo to you, and again, I'm just want to give you encouragement and support in what you're trying to do.
Thanks.
Actually, the reason that I went to Dennis before I did my second thing is because I actually forgot the question that I was going to ask TC. So thank you, Dennis, for allowing me to catch myself here and get myself caught up. So TC, the question that I have for you is, you found a conduit in the walls and you're able to run cable through it. Are you actually running HDMI cable from point to point, or are you converting that?
I don't know.
You don't know. Okay.
Yeah, I'm one of the ones that I didn't know the hardwire cable portion of it. I'm ignorant to how that works. I understand they have found someone that knows how to do the video cabling stuff. So I did hear murmurs there was some kind of maybe a Cat 5 or Cat 6 to HDMI conversion going on somewhere. And does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I was a little concerned because I know HDMI has a distance limitation to it. Yeah. And I've heard 50 feet depending on the cable, but my experience is the shorter the better.
The converters need to be powered, right?
Well, they make them both ways, so okay. I would strongly encourage powered.
I'm on a tangent right now, so would they use power over Ethernet? Could you do it that way? Have you seen that?
There's a fairly new protocol called HD-base-T that will actually allow you to run power signal and control signal over 1 or 2 Ethernet cables.
Okay.
So you guys may want to consider looking into that.
Sure.
It's only like 100 watts of power, but you know, if you're running a smaller LCD, then that should be plenty. So, Paul, do you have anything to add, or Jeremy?
Well, I think that as far as cost of installing the stuff and the wiring, that HDMI cable in and of itself is really hard to take around corners. Ethernet cable, and like you said, has a much longer distance, and even the ability to have the cost of the cable. I don't know what HDMI cables go for at 50 feet, but I know that making your own Ethernet cable, if you can crimp the ends of it, can cost you about $5 for one single line. And so if you need to run 10 different rooms, that's probably the best, even with converters and all of that stuff, that's probably the best solution for a lot of different churches that want to take that on.
Okay. Paul? I'm wondering if we're about to lose Paul again, or...
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Do you guys feel like we have covered this enough, or is there any other questions? TC, I know you guys are kind of on the brink of installing a system, and I want to make sure that you don't have any questions hanging around that we're not answering in relation to installing a distribution amp and making sure you get signal to where you need to get it to.
So I guess I would ask, what's a good resource? What's a good website you would recommend to read up on this kind of stuff?
Oh, man. You had to hit me with that one, didn't you?
Okay, so just hit the buffer and rewind. I won't ask it again.
No, it's fine. I'm going to temporize here and ask Jeremy if he may have something off the top of his head while I think about that.
As far as the streaming or as far as the cabling?
Like cabling and stuff. What's a...
Yeah, I think that there's actually probably not a ton of different options as far as talking about cabling. I know the church, what is that called? Church TechCast? I can't remember what they're called now. But one of the guys, and maybe we can put this in the notes afterwards, so if you guys catch this on the flip side watching this, then we'll have a link to it. But there is one group that I know talks about it some, but they're really more sound focused, so they would tell you how to run sound for cabling for different audio stuff, and so maybe you would, instead of having a whole video display for what the church is trying to do, they would just do the speakers, and so you could hear it, but it wouldn't necessarily be the visual. I think that a lot of the stuff is probably industry-based, and so you could probably just go out there and just look up tutorials, probably a lot of forums within the tech world of how do you run cable in general. And so it might look a little differently in the sense of they're talking about starting from the ground up. They might be talking about doing a home installation or something like that. But in the general process of doing something like this, I think that the approach is probably the same. And by all means, I would say ask those questions in this community, because there's probably a lot of people that know how to do it. They just don't necessarily have a blog or anything that they update that regularly.
All right.
One thought I had.
Well, I would
I'd
also like to. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say one other tangent, Tim, bring us back if we need to. But one tangent of, if we go the streaming routes, as far as trying to get it to download through Chromecast, Apple TV, something like that, how would you interact with networks? What are some best practices, tips for churches that are using 1, 2, 3 different networks for their church to be able to best interact with that, to keep the cost low, to make sure that Sunday morning things don't break down, but at the same time you're getting great service and not overpaying during the week, because Sunday is just one day out of 7, and so how do you keep that overhead cost down? I'd love to hear all those different thoughts too.
Yeah, I think a modern router is probably good enough, because multiple in, multiple out technology has really matured over the past 5 or 6 years. So the days of having 2 antennas, one being primary, one being like a warm backup, and all your packets going through a single element are really gone. So most modern routers have the capability of setting up separated networks within that same piece of hardware. So I don't see any kind of extra hardware cost or even a second ISP cost, especially if the streaming can be done within the church's network. If it doesn't require ISP traffic, then setting up two separate Wi-Fi networks within the same router that has, some of them have up to like 8 antennas inside them, I think that'd be sufficient and would keep costs down at the same time.
Does that answer your question, Jeremy?
Yeah, I think that, well, I have my own solutions, but I definitely would love to hear even more if there's more. But I know that there are networks out there, there are mesh networks that will take the IP and split it, and so you have these artificial caps within the entire network that it will save 80% of the bandwidth for production or for just the entire church use, and the other 20% on Sundays is designated to unlocked or at the very least a separate password that is given out from the tech people on Sunday mornings. So I know that is also another option, that it's artificially throttled.
Yeah, and I love mesh networks. I'm also a ham radio operator, and I'm working on a plan to blanket Colorado Springs in a amateur radio emergency mesh network. So that's neither here nor there. But also part of what you're talking about was like QoS, quality of service traffic management, to where you can give video packets priority over, any other regular packet. And the downside to that is that if you're sharing a Wi-Fi amongst, like Tim was saying, your mission critical stuff and your public stuff, then the public stuff is going to experience throttling because of all the video going on, and then you have a dissatisfied customer base. And I'd want to avoid that as well. So yeah, QoS could do it. Mesh networking could definitely do it, but you've got a little higher equipment costs at that point because you're running multiple pieces of hardware. Yeah, as with most things technology, there's many different branches you can go, and you have to look at what in the acquisitions world we call it your trades. What do you have to have? What can you do without, and what just has to be cut no matter how much it hurts. So it's really going to be on a case-by-case basis based on your church's needs.
Fair enough. Excellent. TC, you are turning into quite the resource for network management and information systems, I'm discovering. So I'm very glad to know you.
Someone needs to get him on a blog. That's all I'm saying.
I know, right?
I hear that's coming soon. I don't know, but
somewhere. Terrible inside jokes. I apologize.
My answer to TC's original question about what resources are available for pulling cable and that kind of thing, I would probably point you to Infocom's website. And if you're not familiar with Infocom, I'm not going to bore you with who they are and what they do, but you can find out that at their website. But they are an incredible resource that they have a lot of content on YouTube on how to solder, basically make cables using best practices. I learned a lot for a recent install that I did, and you can go so far to get certified if you want, but I would recommend going there, and I'm sure that they have lots of literature on how to do it. Probably not many how-to videos, but as long as you have pull lines, fish tape, that's basically just steel tape that you run through conduit so that you have something to pull from one end, the cable through. Make sure that, some best practices. Okay, let's talk best practices, based on some recent experience. Okay, if you're taking one cable, okay, right here, and you have another cable, or let's say you got fish tape, I'm sorry, okay, if you just do that much of a connection to pull on, you're going to pull that fish tape right through, especially if you have 90-degree bends in the conduit and a bunch of corners and that kind of thing. So you need to overlap quite a bit and tape the heck out of it. Don't tape too much so it increases the bulk of the cable, but make sure you have enough lead that if you give it some good tugging, it's not going to pull out. Because the last thing you want to do is get your fish tape to let go of your cable halfway through the conduit pull. That's no fun. So a lot of fish tapes have a little loop on the end of it. So another trick is to curl and wrap your cable through the loop. and that also gives you some pulling strength. They have, believe it or not, they have lubricant in plastic little squeeze bottles for pulling cable. You can find it on Amazon. So that's another trick to make it a little easier. But probably the biggest advice I can give you is anytime you're going to pull cable through a conduit, always pull with it some kind of very strong twine or small gauge rope so that you always have a pull line in there because you're always going to add stuff later down the road. So that's kind of my very top level overview of cable pulling, but I have found some blogs, or not blogs, but forums online that list out best practices and how to go about pulling cable through conduits. So the resources are there, but hopefully that gives you a starting point, TC.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, yeah, that was good. Thank you. Hey, so we actually, I don't know if you saw this, not to jump in a whole different topic all of a sudden, but we have a question from the outside.
Oh.
Yeah, it's over there in the chat bar. It's from this cat named Jason, and I'm sure no one here knows this guy. He's not everywhere, you know, because he is. So what's up, Jason? Thanks for watching.
For sure.
But if you guys are cool, with it, I'll just read the question and we can jump into it.
Yeah.
All right.
For sure.
So Jason is saying, can you guys talk about projectors? No. Next question. No, kidding. See, we want to get away from expensive bulb replacements, but not sure if it is a wise investment to upgrade. Also, ideas about portable projectors for mission trips. So that's actually a very cool question because I had noticed one Sunday, maybe a year and a half ago, we're sitting in service and it sounded like a gunshot, right? It was the bulb going out, and our projector, one of our two projectors that's about, I don't know, 75, 80 feet up in the ceiling. Of course, the screen goes out. It's the second service, so okay, they're done for the week. And then soon we get in there, and there's new projectors, right? And I'm good friends with most of the pastors there, and I asked one of them. I said, "So I noticed we had new projectors. What was I know the bulb went out. You know, why not just replace the bulb?" And he said, "Well, those projectors were like 3 years old or something like that. They would finding and getting the bulb for it was an equivalent cost of buying a whole new projector that has better, more evolved features and is just generally a better presenter." So in that case, it was actually more frugal to buy a new projector than it was to buy the bulb. That's the extent of my knowledge. Jeremy, you have something to add in there, I saw?
Well, I think that as far as what it comes down to is probably it's going around the way of the VCR, where you are probably going to have to just realize you're going to buy a new one most of the time. And in some considerations, and this depends on your building, it depends on what your church is willing to do, but some options might be that instead of going the projector route, that you decide maybe it's time to go the screen route where you actually hang up some TVs. A lot of churches are going this route because it works for them. Their entire building is structured and set up so that you can take away the light, and so they don't have these big stained glass windows. And so that is a great option in their case. But if you're someone that maybe wants to consider completely replacing the projector, put that on your to-do list as far as research. And one quick note about it: don't go the plasma route, because those are terrible. Don't go 4K TV because there's no reason to have them. So really, you're at the LCD screens, and what does that look like? How big do you want to go? How effective do you want this to be as far as brightness? And in some cases, you could probably, if you're going to have enough of a purchase, that you might get several for the sanctuary, but then also a couple for other places that businesses will allow you to come in to try them out. And so that might be a great way to be able to try out the TVs in the sanctuary to see if they're an option, or if you just need to go back to the projector. And then that also deals in how do you work with this as far as a portable projector if you want to take it outside of the church somewhere. And so there's also that consideration as well.
So what about, like in my church, we had the two big projectors I mentioned. and our screens are painted on the wall. So there's already a place to put these TVs, but our screens are 16 by 9. Yes, there's 16 by 9 ratio. They're also 16 feet by 9 feet. So do you have experience using multiple TVs to make one single image?
I probably wouldn't do it just because of the border that comes along with each TV and the margin that's there. At that point, you're probably just doing a makeshift projector approach. And I think that there's a lot of great things that you can do as far as projectors too that TVs will never be able to overcome, especially when you're talking about super wide approaches to your display. I think that if you go, there's a website called Church, something about church stage design ideas.
Oh yeah,
that's what it's called. And so they just show you so many different ways to use projectors that LCD TVs will never get to. And I think that that's a huge consideration to be able to go from just a little thing to something that's massive, a completely different scale than what TVs would be able to introduce. But this is probably more for the less ambitious stage design. This is more for you're just willing to be flexible with your presentation. And so if you're stuck in that 16 by 9 category, then maybe it's a situation where you're just going to have to stay with your projector, not move to TVs.
Tim has something.
Well, I'm actually going to let Paul chime in here before I chip in. So go ahead, Paul.
Oh, thanks. I was going to say, on the other end of the budget spectrum, if you're doing super large displays, like let's say you're a Willow Creek or you're Saddleback, you're one of these huge mega churches, not even an average-sized mega church, there are LED panels which don't have lamps whatsoever. It's all RGB LEDs, and those can be any size you want them to be. I mean, they can be small or they can be huge. Now you have to get some distance away because every pixel is about the size of a quarter because it's 3 LEDs, but that's one way to get over that. And if you're going to have an outdoor music festival or something, that's really your only option because the sun is much brighter than anything else that we've devised.
That's a good point. That's a good point. I will jump on or dovetail off of that, Paul, and say that if you have cameras, if you have a live production system, either for record or for live stream or whatever, the downside to LEDs is that you get that pixelation in the background. So that is one other element to consider. I do know that Willow Creek, since we're talking megachurches, invested $1 million each in a system that not only do they have 2 LED screens, but they can actually stack them. They've got a whole system that they can move those screens to any position along two axes. So obviously we're
and they can do it live.
Right. Yeah. So I don't
during
have that budget.
Church, I don't either.
It'd be nice. But for those of us that don't have the Willow Creek budget or technology, I actually just had this conversation a couple months ago with a church client of mine, the LCD TV versus projector discussion. And when I priced it out, they wanted an 80-inch plus dual screen system for a congregation that's not much larger than Dennis's. I'm sorry. So probably about 80 people in the room. And you know, when you're talking about a screen size of that magnitude, the fact that they had bright overhead fluorescent lighting, the fact that we're hanging these things on a wall, the church is located not in the best area in the town that they're located in, it just was not the wisest decision to go with TVs. Now, I'm not saying that that's not a good decision at some point for some churches, but you need to factor in total cost of ownership. If a TV goes down for any reason, that TV has to be removed from the sanctuary or from its location. It has to go get serviced. You're down a screen. Now, I'm not saying that that can't happen with projectors, but you can rent a projector. It's a little more difficult to find an 85-inch LCD TV to rent, even in the Portland metro area here in Oregon. So these are all factors you have to think about. Total cost of ownership with a projector in this case, in my client's case, was much less. It was about $5,000 less than the TV route. So think about the lighting. They don't, as far as I know, they don't make matte surface TVs anymore. They're all glossy. And so that thing's going to reflect like you wouldn't believe. So if you cannot control the ambient lighting, it may not be the right solution for you. Now, getting back to Jason's question, I know that they are just coming out with laser projectors. So we have laser as a light source now. I don't know how good they are. I haven't seen them in use. I think Sony is the one that is pioneering that. But, it's a really exciting time. It's a really confusing time to be trying to keep up with all these technological advancements. But I would also want to venture to say that from an audience member's perspective, I think we're getting to the point where they're expecting to see a widescreen format. They're expecting to see something that is very comparable to what they see at home when they go to the theater. And that is going to be a widescreen format. The aspect ratio changes, obviously, but I think 16:9, at least in my experience, more churches are wanting to spec that out rather than stick with the standard 4:3 square. That I don't know about you guys, but that's what I grew up on. So.
Oh yeah, and on that too, a lot of the software we're using, like ProPresenter, is really only putting out in 16:9. So you're limited if you're in the 4:3.
Well, that's true. You're limited in resolution to a certain respect. So hopefully that sort of answers Jason's question.
Hey,
Paul.
one more on him. On his, he talked about mobile stuff. Has anyone here dealt with Pico projectors?
I don't know. I'm going to let somebody else take a stab at that one if they have.
Does anyone know what a Pico projector is?
I do. I was going to talk a little bit about 16:9 real quick before we went on to the Pico projectors and all that. So from a video standpoint, this is something that it didn't occur to me until we went 16:9. My church has two large Christie projectors, so we're on the lower end of megachurch. And when we went 16:9, it just became so much easier to shoot because when the pastor moved, you had more room front and back for him to move in, and sometimes he was doing this thing where he would lean one way and then walk the other, and so that was no good. So that's another thing in support of 16:9 is if you're doing IMAG at all, image magnification using cameras, if you're doing that at all, it's just so much easier than 4:3 because think of 16:9 not as cropped on the top and bottom. Think of it as adding on the left and the right. So that's something else. But Pico projectors are a good idea, so I'll shut up now.
And I will also add, as far as the type of projectors, because I think this was part of the question, is that my dad being a wholesaler for just schools and organizations across Ohio, which is where he's based out of, probably the two best that he has personally experienced in as far as breaking down replacements, stuff like that, and then just being great quality for the cost. The top two for him were Panasonic as well as Epson. And so I'm sure you can go to any website out there that sells those. I think one great one is B&H Photo, something like that. Google it. But they have great options out there as far as perfect projectors for your situation. So my personal opinion would be Panasonic because the upfront cost is lower. They do tend to have a little bit less effectiveness long term. They wear down a little bit easier, but I think it's like $1,200 to replace it as far as a whole unit again. So that might be a great option for people.
Okay, Pico projectors. I actually ran into my first one a couple weeks ago at an event. They were using it in a boardroom kind of setting, a conference room, to screen a short 12-minute documentary. And I was actually really surprised at the not only the brightness, but the quality of the reproduction of the image. You know, I look at the size of these things, okay, so, you know, this is my TV remote, right? And that's about the size of this projector in this case. I was astounded because, you know, we think of projectors, they're boxy, they're big, they're coming down in size, but they're still, you know, good size, they got good weight to them. This little thing, you know, I thought it was a converter box when I first walked in, and no, it was the projector. Having said that, there are drawbacks. You know, they still don't have the firepower that you know, a 5, 6, 7 or more thousand lumen projector is going to have. So don't buy a Pico projector and expect it to overpower your ambient lighting. You know, in order for us to get an acceptable image at this screening, we had to turn all the lights off. So there are drawbacks. They are very lightweight. They are very portable. But they're limited in resolution, number one, and they're limited in firepower or lumen output.
Right.
And, you know, obviously there's going to be contrast ratio reductions as well, I'm sure. Those are arbitrary anymore anyway, but, you know, just do your research. Know what you're getting into. Would I recommend and spec a Pico projector for IMAG projection? Probably not. In fact, I'll just say it now on the record for posterity. No, I will never spec a Pico projector that at the max can do 3,000 lumens, maybe, for IMAG. Because if you need IMAG, you're going to be in a space that requires a lot more brightness than that.
Yes, and on the idea of mobile for like mission trips and stuff, the last one I saw demoed was it was a tech conference for military, but this was a civilian company. I can't remember the name. I've got an email, so I'll post it after the fact. But this Pico projector was about double the size of your remote. It cost right about $1,200, so it was a little pricey, right? But it had, at the time, it was a small SSD inside of it. It had a PowerPoint playback engine, so you could have any slides, anything you wanted in this thing. And it came with a little like 3 foot by 3 foot portable screen. And this thing was running in a conference hall with full lighting. Anything you could possibly imagine was lit up, right? And they've got this running slideshow going on their table where it was sitting maybe 6 feet away. So this thing was good for, you could see it across the room pretty clearly. Not excellent, right? But if you're in a small room on a mission trip, and you wanted to have like an ad hoc worship, and you wanted to like flip through some lyric slides, or someone speaking, and they had some scripture. This thing was perfect for that. The price was up there, but the feature set and its capability in a full lit room was pretty astounding.
Let me suggest, if you're just thinking portability, maybe a good compromise is a DLP projector. Because DLP uses, it sounds like steampunk, but it's true, little bitty mirrors, so you get a great contrast ratio because they just angle the mirror away where they want black, so that's actual black, it's not dark blue like an LCD, and you can get a standard lamp to go inside of it so that you get more firepower, more brightness, and the price is around the same as an LCD projector. So if I was doing a lot of traveling and I needed to take a projector with me, a DLP is definitely something I would do because they're really great for video as well.
I guess my final word would be that, you know, for mission trips and that kind of thing, if you're going into the heart of Africa and, you know, you're running everything off a generator, then that would probably be pretty ideal. You know, number one, your audience is not going to be the same audience. And so the fact that you have something that can project moving images is going to be, holy cow, that's awesome. Two, most of these events are probably going to happen in dark environments, at night or inside. So I would say Pico projector is probably a pretty good way to go. There are some that are a few $100s that double as video cameras, and you can record straight to the hard drive and then project off the hard drive. There are some that just project. There are lots of options out there. I would caution that the lower the cost, the lower the quality. The old adage, you get what you pay for, is true. So I want to make sure that we're not recommending people go out and buy a $200 Pico projector, because that may not be the best quality. You may only get SVGA. I don't know. It depends on the projector. So make sure you understand what you're getting. But I think it's a burgeoning technology. I think it's here to stay, and I think they're only going to get better.
Cool.
So we are pretty much right up against the clock here. I guess we can hold off on the other two items for our next Hangout. Does everybody feel like their questions have been answered? Any closing thoughts?
The sky is blue.
I will say, leave your questions in the community if they didn't get answered, or if you have even further thoughts about it, just so we can keep the dialogue going. I think that this is a great starting point as far as talking about projectors, talking about wiring versus streaming, and I think that there's so many different questions, so many different situations, so don't hesitate to ask, because with every situation there's definitely some kind of solution that will best fit your church, even if that means not doing anything at all. So go ahead and ask.
Absolutely. Paul, any closing remarks?
No, I think we've pretty well covered it. A lot of great information on here tonight. So I've been trying to mute and unmute, and you might have noticed that I lost signal a lot. That's until I switched to a different internet. Then everything's fine. Very crazy.
TC?
No, I'm good. I just want to thank everyone for watching, and thank you for sticking through it to the end here.
Absolutely. And our new participant, Dennis, was this helpful for you?
Yeah, it was really good. I enjoyed the time and hanging out with you guys. Thanks for letting me be a part of it.
Excellent. Well, I guess Jeremy and et al., to use whatever language that is, I guess this is it for this version, Church Tech Hangout number 2. I guess Jeremy will be posting in the community about our next one.
Yeah. So definitely make sure to look forward as far as probably the beginning of December to avoid holiday, and as well as a recap of notes and the video.
Yeah, I got a lot of catching up to do. So,
Cool.
yeah, we'll get in on there, and please, everybody watching, if you have questions, again, we cannot reiterate this enough. I don't want anybody to think that we're the experts. We are all learning. Some of us have more experience than others in certain areas, but you know what? We're all servants of God. We're all here for each other. So if you're having a really hard time, put it in the community. We are here to help each other. So with that, God bless, and we'll see you next time.